Good afternoon. My name is Kayla Peters. I am the Outreach and Event Coordinator here at the Kensington Falls Church. On behalf of the Kensington, we thank you for sharing your time with us this afternoon. The Kensington Falls Church is an assisted living and memory care residence located in the heart of Falls Church, Virginia. Our enhanced programs enable us to deliver care beyond what the traditional senior living community can deliver. We are open for in-person and virtual tours by appointment. Please visit our website. We look forward to listening to your needs. Now, let us review a few housekeeping rules for this afternoon. We are using Zoom webinar format, so your videos and microphones will be off. We collected a number of questions from our registrants prior to the event, but if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to submit them, which we will read to our speaker at the end of the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. We are fortunate to be hearing from our Memory Care Director and PAC Certified Trainer, Tonya Embly. Tonya has been with the Kensington Falls Church since we opened our doors 4 years ago. Tonya oversees our Connections neighborhood, which offers early to mid-stage memory care, as well as our Haven neighborhood for residents in need of mid to late stage memory care. Tonya is trained in Teepa Snow's Positive Approach to Care, or PAC. As a PAC certified trainer, Tonya has shared her knowledge and insights with each team member throughout all departments of our building. Today, we are excited to share Tonya's approach to care with you. We hope that today's glimpse into the positive approach to care will help you join the journey of dementia care and find confidence in caring for your loved one with dementia. Please join me in welcoming Tonya Embly.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm thankful to have you join me, and I want to thank you for joining for the first part of our three-part series on how to respond to someone who's living with dementia using the positive approach to care. In today's webinar, I want to go over, I want to introduce you to ways that we approach somebody with dementia, because approach is very important. And so through this approach, it'll lead us into the second and third webinar on other ways to help you with people living with dementia. Human beings take in data in 5 different ways. I'm going to go over those 5 different ways with you. The first way, and stick your thumb out, the first way to approach somebody with dementia is visual. Visual is very important. It's the most powerful way that people take in data. Your visual is in, if you touch the back of your head, the visual is in your occipital area. And if you think about it, you have 2 eyes. And so you have wiring that goes back for one eye and wiring that goes back with your other eye. With someone who's living with dementia, that wiring gets tangled up. So let's think about an example. I don't know how many of you guys ever played when you were younger with a slinky. I remember as a youngster playing with a slinky, they were always wire. And the first couple times you played with it, it would go downstairs very nicely. But then after you played with it for a while, it would actually get all tangled up. Think about somebody with dementia. That wiring gets all tangled up. So it's very difficult for people living with dementia because the wiring that's connected with their eyes, going back to their occipital area, it's all tangled up. So somebody living with dementia, you should always approach them visually first. The second approach to dealing with somebody with dementia is auditory. Auditory is your hearing, and you have 2 ears, and so your auditory is also wired together. You have wiring coming from your left and your right ear. This is the second most important part of approaching somebody with dementia. All forms of dementia attack the brain asymmetrically. What that means is it attacks one part of the brain more than the other. It attacks generally in the left side of your brain. We don't really know why it attacks the left side of the brain first, but it attacks the left side of the brain first. And then it begins to spread. So nobody really knows why that happens. People living with dementia get more out of what they see than what they hear. And so caregivers do too much of this. And I tell my care managers here at the Kensington all the time, use less of this and more of this, which is visual. If you think about it, use visual and then use verbal, and look what you've created. You've created a gun. So if you're doing too much of this, take that gun and put it to your head and trigger it. People living with dementia are going to see more of people with dementia are perceiving more of what they see than what they are actually hearing. They're going to use your visual cues. So when you are actually doing too much of this, what they may be hearing is, I don't know if you remember the character Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. So what you may be saying, they are visually watching you, and how you are portraying yourself when you're talking is what they are visually taking in. So if you approach somebody without smiling, without enthusiasm, if you approach them in such a manner that it's like, we need to take a shower now. I'm not so sure I would want to take a shower from somebody who's like, we need to take a shower now, because it might be somebody who's refusing to take a shower. So you want to make sure that when you approach somebody living with dementia, that you are actually, even though you have to talk to them, you want to make sure that what they are visually getting is a good sight. And so approaching them in a calm, gentle manner, use very few words, and don't ask them if they want to do it. Ask them, say to them, we're going to take a shower. Because most times if you ask somebody with dementia, do you want to? They're going to say no. I can tell you that when you are working with somebody with living with dementia, if you ask them, most times they're going to say no. And I'm going to tell you that there is no fight you're ever going to win with somebody with dementia. You have to make sure that they feel like they are in control. You don't want to control them. Who needs to change? We need to change. We need to change in how we approach them, and we need to change in how they want it done. The third way of approaching somebody with dementia, first you're going to do visual, then you're going to do verbal, and unfortunately the third one is, the reason we use this finger is because it's a reminder to you. Never do this before you do visual and verbal, because if you touch somebody, this is sensory motor, okay? What you feel, you may like. What you feel, you may not like. If you like it, then what's going to happen is you're going to want more of it. If you don't like it, that could cause somebody to become angry. So you always want to do the visual and the verbal before you do the sensory motor. Now, to take you back, I forgot to tell you that your hearing is, your auditory is right here. This is your seeing, this is your hearing. For the sensory motor, it's located in this part of your brain. If you think about it, your visual is wired to your sensory motor, and your auditory is wired to your sensory motor. So you want to make sure that if you're going to do this, that you've done this and this, which is visual and verbal. Light touching move. It might feel like cockroaches crawling all over your body. Think about somebody who doesn't like the physical touch, and you're putting clothes on them. They may not like the feel of it. Maybe that's why they don't want clothes put on. So if you visually approach them and then verbally approach them by telling them what you're going to do, what you're going to help them with, then only then do you do the touch part. The touching can also spark your fight, flight, or fright. And that's very important to know, because if you approach somebody from behind, say you see somebody that you really like and you approach them from behind and you don't give them the visual and the verbal, if there's somebody living with dementia, then you might get a reaction that you don't like. It might be you've scared them. It might be that you have caused anger and they might strike out at you. I'll give you an example of a resident that I didn't give visual and verbal to. I sat down next to her. She knew that I was sitting next to her, but a couple seconds had gone by and I gently put my hand over on her elbow to give her that confidence feeling. Instead, the reaction she had was she stood up and started screaming, "Why did that lady touch me? Why did she hit me? I don't even know who she is." It's very important that you do the visual and verbal first, because that's the type of reaction that you may receive. And it wasn't a good feeling for me, because I knew I needed to provide the visual and the verbal, but I was in the moment and I reached out and I touched her arm and I saw what it caused her reaction. So it's very important to do those first two things. Somebody's sneaking up on you. I know myself, if somebody walks up behind me, I have peripheral vision. I'm 55 now, and somebody who's 75 years of age and older who isn't suffering from memory loss, their peripheral vision is like this. It's not like somebody who's younger who their peripheral vision is like this. They can stick their arms out and they can actually see their fingers moving without turning their heads. As somebody gets older, whether they suffer with dementia or not, their peripheral vision is limited. That's why you start seeing a lot of falls in elderly folks, is because they don't see out the side of their eyes like somebody who may be 25 years of age. So you have to be certain that even if it's not somebody living with dementia, that you give them some kind of a warning that you're there and not just walk up behind them, because they may not even see you there and you could scare them, and possibly that scare could cause them to fall. So remember to do the visual and the verbal before you do the touch. Light moving touch is alerting and arousing. This is up against you, someone sneaking up on you. Light moving touch is alerting to them. This is hyper alert. What happens with hyper alert is you have your limbic system, which is located in the core of your brain. And when someone's scared, it releases a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol causes somebody to be frightened. A simple technique in releasing that cortisol, and I use this myself when I get excited, is to take 3 deep breaths. So if you could with me, take 3 deep breaths, breathe in. Breathe out. Do it 2 more times. And then a 3rd time. This actually releases the cortisol that has been dumped all over your brain. So whether or not you are living with dementia or not living with dementia, that cortisol can be dumped on your brain, and it's a good way to release it. Several times when I have a resident who is upset, I will do breathing exercises with them. They have no idea why I'm doing it, but it's fun for them. So, you know, it's like, let's breathe in, let's breathe out. You know, and if they were excited before that, that actually releases that cortisol that was dumped all over their brain. The top, if I mention the top part of your brain is your sensory motor, there is wiring between your vision and your sensory motor. There's wiring between your hearing and your sensory motor. Now, someone in late stage dementia may hear, like I said, Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. So you need to remember to give them that visual. If you think, for an example, a balloon pops behind you, do you just sit and not turn around? No. If I heard a balloon pop behind me, the first thing I would do is I'd turn around and look at that balloon. That's because the biggest part of your sensory intake is your vision. So when you hear it, you're automatically going to turn to see what that noise was. And that's where you're going to get the awareness of what is going on. The other two parts of your brain, of taking information into your brain, is your smell, and that would be this finger, and your taste. I will tell you, here at the Kensington, we do a lot of baking. Think about when you were a kid, especially around Christmas time, and your mom is in the kitchen. She's baking cookies, she's baking cakes. What a great feeling that is as a child, smelling. I remember smelling the smells from my mother and thinking to myself, oh, I can't wait to bite into that cookie. I can't wait to bite into that pie. We do baking here at the Kensington because smell brings back memories for our residents, and it gives them a relaxing feeling because it brings back good memories of maybe their wife or their husband baking, or maybe clear back to their childhood when their mother was baking. So having nice smells in your house is a real advantage for you because it's going to give them that fuzzy feeling. So like I said, here at the Kensington, we do lots of baking. Just this week, we baked cookies, we baked Mexican pita bread. Not only does the smell help with the person living with dementia, but if you include them in the activity, give them a set of gloves and let them help you bake. And that's going to really make them feel like they're part of what's going on. But then when they smell it, it's going to give them that warm, fuzzy feeling. The last part is taste. The first two things that a person living with dementia loses is salt and sweets. So if you're wondering why your loved one with dementia is eating so many sweets but won't touch their food, it's because that's the part that they're craving and they just can't get. So they might try and eat more sweets than they do an actual meal because they're craving those sweets. With salt, I remember my mother, she didn't have dementia, but I remember sitting, there was always a big thing of Utzes sitting next to her, the big pretzels, and she used to like eating those big pretzels and they were filled with salt. Somebody with dementia, you don't want to keep salt shakers around them because their first reaction is they want to pour as much salt onto their food as they can because they want to taste the salt. The best way to handle something like this, leave them in control and have packets of salt. If you have packets of salt, you can give them 2 or 3 packets of salt. They feel satisfied because you haven't neglected them having the salt shaker, and they're able to take those packets, and you might need to help them open the packet so that they can pour it onto the food, or they might be able to do it themselves, but they feel like, oh, I have the salt. So here at the Kensington, we do give them packets of salt to put onto their food if there's somebody who's really craving that salt taste. If we gave them a salt shaker, chances are it would be like this, and they would be trying to pour all kinds of salt on their food. And even though we think all they're going to taste is salt, they may not, because that's one of the tastes that they've actually lost. All humans take in data in 5 ways, and let's review. It's how they see, always provide visual first. After you provide the visual, then you want to provide the verbal. Somebody in late stage dementia, when you're providing the verbal, you might want to use less words, and you also want to allow for processing time. During that processing time, don't answer for them. Give them a chance to actually try and come up with the word. Then you might want to say to them, do you want me to help you? And only if they say they want you to help them, then you help them. The third one, which we remember this way, is do not provide touch until you've provided the visual and the verbal. And only then do you provide the touch. And then the last 2 ways of taking in data into your brain is through smells and taste. Smells, even at nighttime, have a aromatherapy. The best type of aromatherapy is lavender. Lavender really relaxes somebody. So if you have lavender incense or lavender oils to put into a pot, if you have that, it relaxes them and may help them to sleep. The last part is the food intake as far as salt and sweets. Even though you want to limit their sweets, they're craving those sweets. So you might want to make a low calorie dessert versus a high sugar dessert. And then also include them in the baking so that they feel like they have been included in the process. And the next two part of our webinars, I'll continue in our next webinar on how to communicate with your loved one and the space distance and how to approach them even closer besides just how they take things into their brain. So I welcome you to join me next month in our second webinar to go over the next steps in how to deal with challenging behaviors.
Thank you so much, Tonya. Now we're going to go into our questions portion. And if you had any questions throughout this, please again submit them through our Q&A format. Okay, so going on with some questions. Here's a question that we had. What's the best way to redirect someone with dementia when they are upset?
Somebody who's upset, if they're upset at that very moment, the best thing to do is walk away, give them a few minutes, and then reapproach. When you reapproach, you might want to use the techniques that I went over today. Give them the visual, the verbal, and then the touch. You might just want to sit back and talk about something else. You want to recognize what the triggers are for your loved one. And when you recognize the triggers, then you can think about, come up with a plan. What triggers them? Why is that triggering them? And then come up with, how can I approach them without that trigger? And in later webinars, I'll introduce you to some ways that you can, like I know some people don't like taking showers. In later webinars, I will actually go over how to approach somebody who's refusing to take a shower.
Okay, thank you. Another one that I have received was, how can I build confidence in my loved one, as I seem to show a lack of confidence in my loved one's abilities?
So first off, in my Connections in Haven neighborhood, I don't see them as living with dementia. I consider all of them my friends. I don't treat them any differently than I would treat a special friend of mine other than my approach. And you can't show fear, because the minute you show fear, that makes them fearful, because if you have that look on your face, remember, visually, they're taking that in. And if they see that look on your face, they're going to feel the same way. So you want to take the techniques that I told you today and approach them that way, and not show any fear at all. Show confidence. It's very important to show confidence and not show fear. And that's not always easy, because sometimes when you're caring for your own loved one, one thing that I've learned is that sometimes the people you love the most are the people you hurt the most. And so I tell my families that sometimes is they may treat us differently because I'm not your wife, I'm not your husband. And especially if you're a child, even someone living with dementia, they don't want their child to tell them what to do. I brought you into this world, I'm going to take you out of this world, is probably what their reaction is going to be. So sometimes letting somebody else take on the care of your loved one and you becoming the loved one and not the caretaker sometimes helps.
Thank you. Okay. Now, how to approach families best in regard to care planning for their loved one who is in end-of-life care?
So this is a difficult question, because if they're end of life, it would seem to me that the family would already know that their loved one was end of life. But we do get a lot of people who don't bring their loved ones to us before they've reached the late stages of dementia. They don't even realize they're in late stage dementia. And then by the time we assess them and bring them into the Kensington, they are in late stages and they may not even realize they don't have that much time left. I would suggest contacting a geriatric care manager who can walk you through planning, help you find the right location. But some people are in denial. You have to approach them in a very gentle way. And you might want to have them watch some videos of Teepa Snow and recognize some of the signs of somebody who is in late stage dementia.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, what are some ways to identify the memory loss with a loved one and medical providers without humiliating the individual?
Okay, so in the early stages, it's very difficult because most people who are in the early stages, they start to recognize that they're doing things like losing their keys all of a sudden. They might be taking the wrong way on the highway. They're recognizing, but they're trying to mask it. So the best way to approach somebody who has memory loss is if you're a family member, you might want to just take them into a neurologist and have an examination by the neurologist. Sometimes the neurologist will actually be a great asset to you and actually being able to identify whether it's MCI, which is mild cognitive impairment, because I can tell you I lose my keys. I keep a lanyard around my neck with my keys because I lose my keys several times a day. I don't think I have dementia, but I do know that as I get older, your brain can only hold 5 to 8 items at a time. And so a good way to address it is let's go to a neurologist and have an MRI and let's see what's going on. Also, getting them stimulation, getting them exercise, spending time with them. That's a great way to actually recognize, is my loved one suffering from mild cognitive impairment or are they actually experiencing signs of dementia? Not everybody who forgets has memory loss. They get slower, but they can start their own tasks. So I would start with a neurologist and then proceed from there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, now, let me see. So someone who is having trouble sleeping or resisting sleep, how do you help get someone to sleep?
Okay, so it depends on what their life was like. If they were somebody who was used to staying up all night, it's hard to change their behaviors. So sometimes you have to accept the fact that they are staying up at night. It's not the person living with dementia who needs to change. We need to change. And so something like that can be very difficult because maybe you work and you can't stay up all night to watch your loved one. That's when you might speak with a neurologist or a primary care doctor and actually ask about some medications. We prefer not to go the medicated way before we go the way of stimulation. We've had people who come to our Kensington and they'll say, oh, they stay up all night. But then when they get all that stimulation during the daytime, I'm like, they're not experiencing nighttime issues. So I would try stimulation first. I would also try like lavender, put lavender lotion on them. Maybe a sound noise, a noise sound, those machines that make noises. I know myself, I can't sleep unless I have a earphone in my ear that's reading me a book. And if I wake up and the earphone fell out, I have to put it back in order for me to sleep. So some people do have sleep issues. I don't always want to go the medicated way, but if it's interfering with their health, if it's interfering with their aggressiveness, then that's when you might want to seek medical attention and actually get something to help them sleep.
Right. Okay, great. And then I have, what are some good ideas or tips for visiting with my loved one with mid-stage dementia that lives in assisted living, as I'd like to avoid asking questions which seem to make them anxious because their long-term memory is severely impaired?
Okay, so one thing is and I see this all the time. People will come in and say, do you remember me? Which one am I? What's my name? You don't want to ask them questions like that. It could be something as simple as bringing pictures from their childhood or from your life as a spouse. Our residents love reminiscing over pictures. They might not even recognize the people in the pictures, but they're colorful and they really like looking at them. Occasionally they might recognize somebody. You know, and you know, don't talk about, you know, oh, I know you have memory loss, or I know, you know, you want to keep it simple. It might be just bringing some of their favorite items. Maybe they like McDonald's. So you might want to bring McDonald's food to them, and, you know, that relaxes them, and then you can have a better visit with them. I know we have one resident who doesn't quite understand what her son is saying to her when he talks to her, and he can't talk to her very well, but she reads things very well. So my suggestion to him was, come with things written on cards. It was her birthday recently, and when she received the cards, she read every single word that was in the card, and then she would smile and laugh, and then she would be able to recognize who that person was. If we had just said, hey, so-and-so said happy birthday, no reaction. Mm-hmm. But by providing that card to her and letting her read it and have it say, love so-and-so, mm-hmm. She got it. So if your loved one's still able to read, maybe communicating might be through actually writing to them versus actually trying to give them verbal. Mm-hmm. And once again, if you go back to, this is the greatest way, visual is the greatest way to get information into the brain. And maybe reading those words is what attracted her versus what you're saying to her.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you. And now, last one. I know you said, as you just said, the first step is visual. Would you be able to give maybe like an example of how someone would approach somebody visually and what that looks like?
So we're actually going to go over that part in our next webinar, but I'll give you a simple cue. If you take your arms and stick them out like this and do this, this is somebody's personal space. Somebody with dementia, you and theirs is their personal space. So even though you're 2 feet away, you want to stay out of their personal area. And then you just want to wave a hand, get their attention. You don't want to do this because, you know, when they're babies, they're like, having someone living with dementia is like the circle of life. And so their brain goes back. If you see an MRI of somebody with dementia, and then you look at a child, their brains are very similar. So you have to be very cautious in how you enter their personal space. And somebody who's a baby, they like swinging at things. So when your hand is doing this, they might be like, cool, you know, swatting at it. So in our next webinar, we're actually going to go over how to approach somebody and use what's called hand under hand, or short for and actually show you how to approach somebody with dementia.
Okay, great. Well, that was our last question. So I do want to thank you so much, Tonya, for being here with us this afternoon and going over the 5 steps to the positive approach to care. And as Tonya said in her next webinar, which will happen on May 14th, she will discuss more in depth on how to approach someone, going over hand under hand. So we hope to see you all there, and we thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Tonya.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.